Hey, yo, lesson here, babe. You come at the king, you best not miss.
This is a phrase that has been in literature and art for centuries at this point, with traces of it going all the way back to Machiavelli and The Prince. Some phrases die out as their relevance lessens, like why buy the cow when you get the milk for free, which essentially just equates women to farm animals. Or hold your horses, which is a metaphor for pulling on the reins of a horse that you're riding. But there are some phrases that have survived for dozens of generations and still hold the same meaning that they once did. You come at the king, you best not miss, is one of these phrases. I'm sure that you could understand the meaning of this phrase, but just in case, it is essentially a warning to someone who wishes to kill a political leader, saying that if they miss, then the oppression and the bad sides of said leader will become 10 times worse than they already were. Believe it or not, this phrase didn't die with the monarchy. It can be used in numerous situations of power, including the President of the United States. For instance, did you know that there was an attempt on Abe Lincoln's life 4 years before he was shot in Ford Theater? Ultimately, no shots were taken, but there was a fully proven plan to assassinate the soon-to-become president in 1861, and the public was fully aware of it. Did this have an impact on his presidency? In the long run, probably not, but his story does fit the pattern that I'm about to show. How did Abe Lincoln perform in the upcoming election then? Now, that was a long time ago, so let's talk about your grandfather's favorite president, Ronald Reagan.
In fact, I'm the first Republican candidate to come here since 1968.
In March of 1981, when exiting a Hilton hotel where he had just spoken, a man fired 6 bullets at the sitting president, to which, if the Secret Service did not act quickly, it could have killed him. He was shot in his side and rushed to the hospital, where he told the doctors and nurses wheeling him into the operating room that he hopes that they are Republicans, to which one of them responded, "Right now, we are all Republicans, sir." 2 months later, at a speech, a balloon was popped, to which Ronald Reagan paused from his statements and claimed,
"We're reminded of the many traditions of openness and democracy that have marked the history of this city. America missed me."
So now let's look, as we did with Abe Lincoln, at how he performed in his next election. Holy shit, he won 49 states. Now, some of you may be thinking that Reagan was so long ago, and up until about a week or two ago, my evidence was pretty scarce. But since this happened...
Something that said, take a look at what happened.
I feel it is necessary to talk about what could and potentially will happen this November, and why being informed historically can help you to prevent this cycle from continuing. A wise man once said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does often rhyme. When I heard the news that former President Donald Trump had been shot, I sincerely was holding my breath. I'm not saying this because I wish he survived, and I'm also not saying this because I wish death upon anybody. But because I knew that the future of American politics was completely dependent on the condition of the former president. If he died, then we plunge headfirst into uncharted territory where the MAGA movement is being spearheaded by someone who is not Donald Trump and could potentially weaken that movement. Or it would be a landslide victory, as history has shown. Come this November, I would love nothing else than to be proven wrong, but that will not happen under the current circumstances. So now I want to take a step back and take a look at what the Democratic Party needs to do in order to negate Donald Trump becoming a political legend, similar to how Ronald Reagan did.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
The first thing that needs to happen is for Joe Biden to withdraw from the presidential race. Now, if there are any hardcore liberals watching this video, that does not mean
President Joe Biden has just announced that he is dropping out of the 2024 presidential race. In a stunning letter that was just released moments ago by his campaign on X, formerly known as Twitter, Biden wrote, quote, that it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term.
Oh, shit. Well, the majority of this script was written before President Biden decided to step out of the presidential race, so that obviously can't be included. So now we have to take the next logical step. What does Kamala Harris need to do in order to be not only a strong candidate against Donald Trump, but also a candidate who can beat Donald Trump come this November?
Sometimes people will open the door for you and leave it open. Sometimes they won't. And then you need to kick that fucking door down.
If you go quiet, look, 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 if you go.
So let's start with the positives of what Kamala Harris could potentially bring to the table in a campaign battle against Donald Trump. Number one, she is the most natural candidate in this current situation. I am of the belief that if another person, say Pete Buttigieg...
Speaking of things that are at stake that do not belong to a single political party, the good news is the condition of my soul is in the hands of God, but the Iowa caucuses are up to you.
Or Gavin Newsom were to be selected for this position, it would open up the Democratic Party to the potential criticism of that they're scrambling or they don't know what to do. They're running around. They're freaking out. But in fact, as we've seen in the last couple of days, that has actually been flipped, and now it seems that the Republicans are the ones freaking out.
What's his name? What's his name? I got nothing on a name. Come on, baby. What's the name? We threw out his name!
Freaking out so much that they're actually claiming that this is an attempted coup.
Is it a coup against Joe Biden?
Sort of, yeah.
I think it is. I mean, look, there's a constitutional process, the 25th Amendment. If Joe Biden can't run for president, he can't serve as president. And if they want to take him down because he's mentally incapable of serving, invoke the 25th Amendment.
You serious?
When the president is just deciding that his mental faculties and capabilities are not what they used to be and is passing it to his vice president, someone who is chosen for that position specifically to be ushered in as president. Another positive about Kamala Harris facing off against Donald Trump is that she could potentially go toe-to-toe with him in a debate. She was previously a prosecutor in San Francisco, and also, when you look back on the debates in 2020, she performed very well, and even performed well against the person who she came to serve under as Vice President Joe Biden.
Everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights, and those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a
so that's
decision.
Where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA.
And this naturally leads me into the negatives of Kamala Harris running against Donald Trump. There are definitely weak spots that the Democrats have, and one of the major ones is national security. They have handled this topic so poorly that they have essentially created it themselves to be a weak subject. Vice President Harris needs to be on the attack rather than the defense against Donald Trump's attacks. She needs to flip the Republicans' narrative on its head, where she shows how barbaric deportation and concentration camp styles of immigration policy ruin people's lives, tear families apart, and ultimately fucking kill people.
Tardamos como casi 2 meses. Como Nogales llegamos y de allí nos metimos allí con migraciones y pidiendo asilo, pero ellos nos recibieron, pero ellos nos golpearon. A mí me hicieron percha, me dejaron abajo como 4 migraciones, se fueron de mí y ya no puedo respirar. Y también el patojo le dieron una patada aquí en su pecho y se cayó de una vez acá y casi se murió.
The Democratic Party can no longer try to fight fire with fire because, as I stated previously, history does not repeat itself, but it does often rhyme. Back in the 1980s, Republicans railed against how Democrats were soft on crime and how they were hard on crime. But during that time, they aired such political gems such as this.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
The Democrats of the time essentially combated this by saying,
"No, we're tough on crime too."
This may have worked in the past for Bill Clinton, but it will not work today. As we have seen in the past few decades, where rather than saying Democrats are soft on crime, which they still do, but instead they're claiming that the Democrats want open borders. So again, flip the narrative and play those heartstrings like a goddamn harp. Republicans have more working class support in America, not because they actually give a shit about them. They don't. But because they have American politics down to a science, practically. The Democrats refuse to play dirty politics, clinging to a non-existent past where Republicans were cooperating when a Democrat was in power. And definitely not trying to sabotage the entire thing. Stop playing their fucking game. When Democrats are in office, they are highly incapable of selling their accomplishments. Is it partially because actual progress is much less flashy and satisfying than performative progress? Yes, absolutely. But it also shows an inability to condense their wants and achievements into short slogans. I'm sure you're already thinking of some, but just to name a few: Make America Great Again, Close the Border, Don't Tread on Me, Guns don't kill people, people kill people, etc. Objectively, the last time a Democratic candidate had a political slogan that was just as, if not more successful than Donald Trump's was Barack Obama in 2008.
The truth is, actually, words do inspire. Words do help people get involved. Words do help members of Congress get into power so that they can be part of a coalition to deliver healthcare reform, to deliver a bold energy policy. Yeah, don't discount that power, because when the American people are determined that something is going to happen, then it happens. And if they are disaffected and cynical and fearful and told that it can't be done, then it doesn't. I'm running for president because I want to tell them, yes, we can.
The way his team ran his campaign, you would have thought that Jesus Christ was running for president. But behind all of it was the phrase, Yes, we can. That's an amazing statement. Not only because it's a political rallying cry, but because it is so broad that almost anybody can latch on to it. It allows for the message to resonate passionately with a much broader audience. Yes, Biden's slogan was Build Back Better, but honestly, that never really took off in the same way. The reason why he won in 2020, very simply, is because he was not Donald Trump. It is very difficult for a sitting president to be re-elected. And one of the main reasons for this is because the way that a political candidate is perceived is one of the most important factors in getting elected. Any chance I get to bring up this example, I will, because it paints my point perfectly. On September 26, 1960, the first presidential debate to be nationally televised was between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. When audiences were polled following the debate on who won, the majority of radio listeners claimed that it was a draw, or that Nixon won. TV viewers, of which there were 70 million, claimed by a large majority that Kennedy had won. One of the main theories behind this is how JFK favored more how he was physically perceived, compared to Nixon, who cared more about appearing professional. A similar thing occurred in 2004 when the Democratic nominee John Kerry was photographed windsurfing, and the Bush campaign went in on this.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message.
In which direction would John Kerry lead? Kerry voted for the Iraq War, opposed it, supported it, and now opposes it again. He bragged about voting for the $87 billion to support our troops before he voted against it. He voted for education reform and now opposes it. He claims he's against increasing Medicare premiums, but voted 5 times to do so. John Kerry, whichever way the wind blows.
Obviously, Kerry lost, and Bush was reelected. But don't worry, John Kerry was not the only Democrat being perceived poorly that year. His fellow Democrat, Howard Dean, was in 3rd place during the presidential caucus until he did this bullshit.
Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. And we're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House. Yeah!
So in closing, how a presidential candidate is perceived matters more than you would think. And that frightened me ahead of the debate set for this September. Because if Joe Biden stayed in the race, ordinary people would have been presented between 2 options. This, or this. And from the perspective of an ordinary American voter, I wouldn't blame them for preferring the guy who was just shot in the ear, has blood on his face, a fist in the air, and an American flag waving behind him. But since Kamala Harris has been endorsed by Joe Biden, I have a slightly different tone. I have a very small amount of renewed hope, but with stipulations. As I stated previously, Vice President Kamala Harris and other institutional Democrats need to be on the offensive. They need to attack Donald Trump rather than trying to defend his. That doesn't mean that I think any of these things will actually happen. In fact, I personally believe that neither of these candidates are fit to serve as president of the United States. But what I am saying is that optics matter. And Kamala Harris needs to actually play politics rather than relying on the same tactics that have been used over and over again by her party in the past 4 decades that have gotten them nowhere. And that is why the failed assassination attempt of Donald Trump metaphorically sealed Biden's political casket. I'm glad that he finally stepped out of the race. While this definitely puts pressure on Republicans, the Democrats still need to remember how to connect with ordinary American people come this November. Listen through the day, run away, oh, miss you every day.